this hybrid session in between the master class of the IAC and the cycle Paisaje Emoción, Landscape and Emotion. Thank you, welcome. Thank you to be with us, all the people who is coming from Barcelona, from this project together with the University Pompeu Fabra. For us, it's very, very important. We are very happy and very lucky to have with us, evidently, Mosè Ricci, but first of all, to have this opportunity to collaborate with the Departament de Humanitats of the University Pompeu Fabra, especially with this project, this cycle seminar, Landscape and Emotion. And thank you, evidently, and welcome to our boss today, our anfitrions, and also our partners, Isabel Valverde, Tony Lluna, and Joan Nogué, who is not here, but is the third musketeer of this adventure, that are the organizers of this symposium, where the IAC is collaborating with this last session. It's a kind of off there in this institute that, as you can see, the people who is not the family of the IAC, who is today with us, is a kind of big garage, a big laboratory, experimental center. It's not a school, exactly in the sense of an academical school. It's more a research center to explore, to experiment this idea of a new paradigms in architecture that we decided, we tried to nominate this advanced architecture. In fact, it's not only for architects. This space is also for geographers, it's also for economists, it's also for informaticians. It's a space to understand the new space of the cities, the new space of the habitat. And for this reason, it's so important, this experience together with the University Pompeu Fabra and the Department of Humanitats, and also for you, with you, to have this capacity, this opportunity to have different people with us. This is your home. Is a space also to be free, to come here, to experiment with us. You have the doors open to come here to the different lectures, for example, different experiments, different activities, different juries, why not? And thank you and welcome again. And we start officially, Mosè, your lecture. Well, evidently I am very lucky to have your presence here for, I think, 4 reasons. And in these 4 reasons, they are not exactly the first of all. That is that we are friends. This is the first, but it's not one of these 4 reasons. It's sufficient. Perhaps we are also colleagues in France. We're colleagues in Genova and also friends, no? And it's not always this is not always common, but in this case, it's true. Mosè is full professor of urbanism in Genova, and in fact, Mosè Ricci is first one of, I think, and it's true, one of the best architects and urbanists in Italy. Is one of the 10, 15, if you want, firms. Ricci 15, 5, why not? No, but it's true, of innovating architecture and urbanism in Italy. The firm is Ricci Spaini Architects. Probably, I don't know, perhaps you show something of your work. They work in a lot of scales, in a multi-scalar approach to the architecture, and for this reason we have this feeling in common. It's full professor of urbanism, but in fact he's a project man. And there is not a scale in our approach to the architecture. The project is a project without scale, and in his firm this is very clear. The second thing is not only professional, or if you want, creative or practicist also. The second is that Mosè Ricci is a very, very implicated person with the education. He has been one of the one of the most important architects in the volunteer to renovate the academical structures in Italy, with a network of people of your generation and of other generations younger. They have tried to do a lot of formats of experiences to try to have another approach to the education, and in this way we are very close, because this is also another kind of experiment to try to renovate the traditional structures of academy. And Mosè was evidently, he was, for example, one of the founders of the Villar Harnoncourt PhD program. It's a very curious and very singular experience of inter-university and inter-departmental PhD program in Italy and also in Europe. It's practically, I think, is one of the most particular experiences in this way. It's not very very useful to find this kind of things. And the Villar Harnoncourt is a very, very, very interesting network of research. He was also involved always in a lot of formats, workshops, singular seminars, experiential formats to renovate the academical structures. And as I say, also he's an educational man in the structured way in Genova, and also he has been visiting professor in different universities, in Harvard, in Lisbon, also in Italy, in French, etc. The third thing is the implication in the research. Evidently it's in relation with this thing, but the research is very important. Perhaps the research is one of the common words to understand the project, the education, and also, why not, the projection of the architecture today. And Mosè is involved in a lot of research programs, but probably now the most important is the recycling research, the print research. That is a research in Italy with a lot of departments and a lot of structures in Italy to understand this idea of recycling or urban recycle, or reactivating urbanism in the cities in Europe. And I think perhaps that it's in relation with your lecture today. It's a very important structure. We found also together other things, MedNet, a network of people who is working about the Mediterranean with a new gaze, etc., etc. The IAC is involved in a lot of these. The IAC is involved also in this research, and it's very important, this general and holistic vision to the research, not as a close and absolutely focalized activity, but more holistic and general experience of the analysis and also of activism, a kind of proactive position. And just to finish, the fourth is you are a man of culture. You are a person who is absolutely implicated in the culture, in the diffusion. Mosè was involved in different adventures with the diffusion, the edition. He was a curator in different collections. And also he has been author of a lot of books. I have, because this book is one of the last, New Paradigms, is about just this, about this transformation of the cities today, with this idea of in-between situation between the sustainability and also the capacity to transform the things, but with new information. And Mosè was also in different scientific committees, editor of Babel, in List, in Monograph. Well, you have a lot of activities there. I think that you have books as New Paradigms, University, University, the capacity of the university to be a big actor in the cities today, and Rischio Paesaggio, etc. No? His work has been exhibit in a lot of spaces, the Maxi of Rome, the Biennale of Venezia, etc., etc., and his activity has been also awarded with a lot of prizes. I think that it's a very, very honor to us to be with you today, and thank you, Mosè, and thank you also again the seminar Landscape and Immersion, and after your lecture we will have a little round table or debate with you, with us, and with all together. Thank you.
So, good evening. Thank you very much, Manuel, for inventing so many things about me, so many kind things about me, but you don't have to trust in. So I'm Manuel said everything much more than I did, I think, but now you have an idea of my activities, and I want to thank IAC and Pompeo Fabbre for faculties for inviting me, and all the IAC staff for assisting us in this trip, Matilde and Silvia and everybody. And I am really honored to participate to this important series of seminars and lectures that you are putting together to different universities. I hope you will understand my English, that is not that good, but you can interrupt me and ask if I am wrong in explaining things. I'm not expert of American city. No? This idea of speaking about Detroit tonight is the idea to involve you all in a contemporary urban narrative about what is happening to the Western metropolitan cities. No? Detroit is really the heart of the economy of the industries, the automotive economy, the Fordist economy, no? And is the icon of the modern city in the Western world. I always say West, then I wouldn't say West anymore, because the situation now, the city is changing, but the situation is very different here in the Western part of the world and in the East, or in the South America, or in Africa. So this learning from Detroit is related mostly to what's happening to our culture world. No? There is this sentence, this is a famous sentence by Carlos Scarpa: then it's not easy. If you want to be happy for 1 hour, get drunk. If you want to be happy for 3 days, get married. If you want to be happy for 1 week, kill a pork and have a banquet. If you want to be happy all life long, just provide yourself with a garden. It's not easy at all to find where this sentence was published, or if it was part of a lecture of Carlos Scarpa. But everybody knows that Carlos Scarpa wrote this sentence. The strange thing is that Carlos Scarpa, that is an architect very, all over known as for his skill in construction, in details, and architecture, said that gardens have to do with the quality of the life and with the happiness in the city. He did not say houses. This is the point. No? I was uncertain if titling this speech The Paradigm of Recycle or subtitling it Learning from Detroit. But then, at the end, forced by Matilde and Sylvia, I decided to title Learning from Detroit. Because in Detroit, it's happening now. I'm not referring to the big crisis of the end of the century and the very beginning of 2000, but right now, in those days, in those years, in Detroit, it is happening something crucial for the urban future, and I think that we all have to focus on it. No? The reference is obviously Learning from Las Vegas. Now, this book of 1966 or 1967 by Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown and Eisner, the other author. But this book made us conscious that something was changing in that last part of the century in the form of our cities and in the way in which we inhabit the territories, and that all this big changing should have had an effect, an important effect on the way in which we are designing and imagining the future for the spaces of the cities. Then there is another important thing that my grandmother used to say, what's happening in America now, in the States now, after 10 years will happen in our houses. Maybe this time is much more shorter now because everything is faster, but I think that this is a good point to look at what's happening in Detroit. The idea of being interested in Detroit started 3 or 4 years ago when we were preparing this big, I would say, exhibition in Italy in the Maxi Museum made by Zaha Hadid in Rome, the last building of the 19th century in Rome, of the last century in Rome. And in this big museum for arts, contemporary arts and architecture, we were preparing for 1 year with Pippo Ciorra, Paola Viganò, Sara Marini, Rainier de Graaf, Philippe Vassal. We were preparing this exhibition on recycle, and recycle is a very popular term. Now we all know what means recycle, how to change, to give a new cycle of life to the materials that we are used to throw out. And we were listening at the urban and landscape and architectural material that we are in the Western world. We are full of, we built a lot. Then I will say something about it. And we are, like scary to reuse, to transform it in something that could make the city more beauty and more comfortable and more, environmentally performing everything. So Recycle became a big exhibition, and then after the exhibition, 2 years ago, we decided to open a national campaign on Recycle Italy with 11 universities, 180 professors, much more scholars and students, and many schools from outside Italy involved, like IAC, like Hanover, like many other schools in Europe. But what is Recycle in our idea? No, this short video by Pierpaolo Pasolini, that is a famous Italian director and writer, shows the base concept of the exhibition, how narrative and project can transform a landfill in a topography, a hill of waste in a landscape. You see Pasolini going up to the top of this enormous landfill in Rome, and watching beyond, towards something in the future. I don't know. Nobody thinks that is a hill of garbage. Everybody see a topography, a mountain, something. The project can transform the garbage in a value with a sliding of sense. This is the action of recycle. It's not reuse, it's not restoration. Restoration means to keep the value of something that has for us a value. Reuse means to reuse something that is not more in use. Recycle means to reuse the material, but to slide the sense, not for the same use, but for creating a new material that has, the meat, I would say, of the pre-existing. Like changing these bottles in a fried bag, not refilling with water. And but the fact that we were interested in is how the action of reusing, that is a design action, can generate beauty or art, can change your point of view. If you want, the simple word is beauty, but the art makes you watch at things from a different point of view. And this moving of your perspective is the interesting thing that recycling can make in the cities. And for example, in the exhibition, we brought those X-ray images that in one place of Eastern Russia they used to play the songs of Jimi Hendrix or Rolling Stone, because they did not have vinyl, and so they used the X-ray to make this vinyl, and you can hear the song. Making those plays on the machine, and but this is art. It is you don't know what to think. It is a head or a arm or the leg that plays Beatles or Rolling Stones, and this is the idea of recycle, like the movie by Pasolini. The exhibition was in this Zaha Hadid building that is not recycled at all. It's a new construction, is a terrific, but also terrible, new construction of the last century in Rome, and was the most visited exhibition they did ever made at the Maxi. Right now, it still is. The exhibition started with this sort of door or gate or carpet that you had to cross. That is the image of the Detroit effect. What's happening in Detroit? No? So Detroit is very well studied, no? And I was the curator of landscape and urbanism for this exhibition. And I asked to Charles Waldheim, that is the dean of landscape at Harvard, if they had in the States something interesting for our exhibition. And he said to me, please, you have to come here and to go to Detroit, and then you understand what's happening there, and then you decide what will you bring to the show. I read Stalking Detroit, that was edited in Spain by Ramon in 2002, if I'm not wrong, or 2001, and was the book made by Charles Waldheim, Chris Reid, and many other scholars that now are mostly all of them at Harvard, and they were studying the cities while the crisis was at the highest point. Detroit has lost inside the 8 Mile Divide, that is the the theme, the title of a song by Eminem, inside the 8 Mile Divide in Detroit. It is the center of a city with a grid, a very modern city with a regular grid and Victorian style mansion houses and industries inside and production and owning and managing of the automotive sector all in the same city. And you see how, I mean, the crisis affected the city with a loss of 1,002,000 inhabitants in the center of Detroit in few years, 15, 20 years. Most, the 80% of those inhabitants were black and workers. I mean, but also the owner of the industry, I mean, the industries were, they closed, and the owners and the managers were also then went out. So they passed from 1,800,000, 900 inhabitants to 650,000, 700,000 inhabitants now in the center of Detroit. Detroit was a city like that at the beginning of the century, and now is something that you can't believe. And is the place where the 3 most important in automotive industries, Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors, that now is owned by the Italians, you know, the Fiat, are the 3 most important industries producer of cars, are with all the other, you know, related activities. And if you go there now, it's like this. It's no more a figure of a city. I say the word figure, not image, because the houses are still there. They demolished many industries. They have a lot of industrial sites empty now, like you can see from this view from above. But you know, the figure in the Roland Barthes idea is a sort of union between, Roland Barthes said that the figure is what you can catch of a body under stretch, I mean under stress. And it's not exactly the image, it's something that has to do with the use, it's something that has to do with the meaning, with the sense, with its significance, and also with the image, you know? And so in Detroit, if you go there now, the city is there, but the figure of the modern cities is no more there. It's like going in Pompeii, like going in, or if you want, it's like going in a park, you know, in an archaeological park. This is the map of the urban abandonment in the center of Detroit, inside the 8 Mile Divide. And this is a diagram that shows how also the poverty is dramatic in the cities. And this is one of the images by Alistair MacLean from above of the center of Detroit. You cannot imagine. It's like being, you know, when you are there, you don't know if you are in the United States, in the center of the industrial world, in the place where the 3 most important industries are. You are in a sort of strange place, abandoned, like being part of a third world with, you know, the nature that is recovering the houses, the squatters that are occupying the houses. Also the university are squatting, abandoned houses in the center to occupy the space with students and classrooms, for example. This is the Grand Central Station of Detroit that was made on the model of the Grand Central Station of New York, and that now is a completely empty building with the windows open somewhere, and the birds crossing, you know, and flying the buildings. This is an abandoned school, I think it was. and those were the skyscrapers for offices and retails in the street level, completely in Midtown Detroit, completely abandoned, no? Or like this, or like this. And this is a disaster. Now, I mean, the crisis is ended. No? Now Detroit is 700,000 inhabitants. Most of them are without work, without a job, but they find out to live. And there are two things to think about. One thing is that this funeral, I would say, of a modern city is very attractive. And there are many exhibitions, and there are a strong narrative where is attractive, and it is identifying the history of America. I mean, if they also have their Pompeii, they have an history. You know, they have something to show to the pupils and to say, look at this. This was like we do with our kids in Italy. No? The Vesuvio eruption made a disaster, but this is a place, an incredible place that is a patrimony of humanity. You know? And so Detroit is is the first really strong archaeology in the States. So there is this fascinating idea of participating to the funeral of modernity, and if you saw recently the Grande Bellezza, there is a monologue about the importance to be at funerals. And funerals is a very important ceremony where you have to go very well dressed, and you have to meet, and you don't have to cry, but you have to present yourself. You know? And they are presenting themselves. I mean, America is presenting itself through the destruction of these Rust Belt places, where Detroit is the dominating figure. No? When you go to Detroit, in this perspective, you feel all the horror and the charm of visiting a dead body. This is an image from satellite with his sensor, and all the red places are the former industrial place, abandoned, demolished, and so on. But since 5 years probably, very recently, something new is starting in Detroit. I mean, something that can go together with the idea of participating to the funeral of modernity. Then for us, I suggest to everybody, if you go to the States, you have to go and visit Detroit, because it's like participating of the death and to the birth of a new kind of city. No? It's like being in Manchester at the end or at the beginning of the last century, or the end of the century before, when the metropolis, the idea of big metropolitan city was, or like being in New York in the middle of the last century, or in Shanghai 20 years ago. Detroit is the place where you can see that the world we are building for us is changing. I mean, we are starting to build a different space for our lives. So Detroit is not only dry bones. There is this other phenomenon. If you look at the same images that I showed before, you see a lot of green areas in the places of the demolished or abandoned industrial sites. And you had the impression of a park, of labyrinth, of a Chinese garden, I don't know, or a Renaissance or Baroque gardens in those lots that were former a modern city. And when I went here to see and to prepare the exhibition, I slept in a beautiful restored Victorian house, 3 Victorian houses restored that make an inn, the inn at Ferry Street. I suggest you to go there because it's very cheap. You can sleep in the rooms with the Morris wallpaper and the mattress, 3 or 4 mattresses. You have to climb to the bed, and you are like an industrial important man in the former era. And then I asked for a guide, because I said to the man in the hotel, okay, I want to visit the city. Oh, he said, visit the city. Do you have a guide to visit for visiting the city? Yes, this is the guide, Cloud Spotting Detroit. What is that? You can imagine that Detroit is probably the largest metropolitan area in the United States. Inside the borders of the metro area of Detroit, you can put the metro area of Boston, of New York, of Washington, and Chicago together. Then the center is the 8-mile divide, but 8 mile is not that small. And then in Detroit you have all the factories made by the father of Louis Kahn, and then you have a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood made by Mies van der Rohe and Ludwig Ibersheimer. I mean, you have a lot of things to visit. But the guide of Detroit is Cloud Spotting Detroit. It's the only official guide I have. And the cloud spots are subdivided in man-made cloud spots or natural clouds. And I thought, these guys are crazy. And then the key of the map is top 10 steam spots, suggested bike route. And then I went there to visit the places. And those are the places, manholes, emitting smoke and produced by the underground heat, because they have a machine for heating the city that brings all the steam underground and then give heat to the residential parts of the city, or something different things. And you have tourists for them, people going around, you know. You can imagine this. And the important thing of this Cloud Spotting Detroit is that this is generating tourism. Incredible, no? In the same way in which they go to visit these old Victorian-like houses taken over by nature, or the abandoned station that I saw, or they go biking, crossing the city in bikes. You imagine biking in the most important automotive place of the world. And they, with an autonomous decision by citizens, they put the asphalt on the old railway that was serving all the industrial sites and made this bike route that crosses all, is like a diameter of a city, and really is very nice to go there and to visit the 3 homes, or the Heidelberg project, that is a project made by citizens in a very poor neighborhood of Detroit that was completely abandoned by the inhabitants, and so they mounted this project of installation of all the things abandoned, showed on the houses in such way, and the neighborhood that was very dangerous to visit when it was inhabited now is one of the places where you can find tourists. I mean, today, the day of his image, of his picture was the end of September during the week, and you can find 10 tourists in Heidelberg project. No? You can believe it. And all the installations are very happy I mean, they are full of hope. They won't stay there. This is my place, the inn at Ferry Street. And then you go to the old market of the city, where all the new farmers of Detroit, I mean the citizens that are cultivating their food directly in the previous industrial spaces, lots, and they are selling the food or exchanging the things around the Eastern market in Detroit. And this phenomenon is becoming very important in the Rust Belt in the States, in the middle of the States, and they organize also the delivery of this fresh food. And in Chicago, they copied the same process, and now there is a sort of food market in Chicago that puts together all the vegetable gardens, the production of the vegetable gardens in the metropolitan area, and it is a business. I mean, you cannot make the calculation of the great economy, I mean, with cultivating a lot. But you can feed a family, and you can gain some dollar to live. I mean, it is the new economy of a city. Then there are, for example, the Dampithera installations that makes the houses like ghosts, or that pushes the renaturalization of abandoned home, or other self-provided incredible projects like this one that is in the big theater of Detroit, where the family of Mr. Ford with Mr. Chrysler and Mr. General Motors, I mean, they met after the concert, and they spoke about the global market of the cars, and now the cars are inside, like this, because this became the parking lot for the American soccer court and the baseball court that are just outside the theater. And when on Saturday or Sunday people come from the metropolitan area to the center of the city to see the game, they leave the car in the hall of the theater. Detroit had, as you can imagine, you know, a crash in economy, in living, in houses. This is the narrative of the death of the city. But in the last years, if you see, from 2009 to 2011, and now the data are much better, Detroit is the most increasing city in the States for the prices of home, for the unoccupied, the unoccupation tax is decreasing much more than in the rest of the states, and there is the economy is restarting. The housing market continues the growth. The growth means that if you go there, if you went there in 2007, somebody will pay you for taking a house in Detroit. Now it costs $10, but from they pay you to $10, the gap is the most significant in the States. I mean, there is a movement, a trend of young people, families, creative persons that goes to Detroit, because in Detroit the city is like a park, because there is a space where you can make art, because you can cultivate your food without buying it, because you can live a very high quality lifestyle without paying it very much. And you see, there are starts to reappear the places for selling houses. And also the economy of the Eastern market starts to become an important economy for the city, and the previous abandoned sites are now gardens for the production of food, or simply gardens. And they started to make a project for the city. But the interesting thing is that nobody in Detroit wants to go back. I mean, all the vision of the future of the city are oriented, I would say, in an ecological way. Nobody wants to rebound what was there before. No? Nobody has the illusion, I will say, neither wishes, and the wish to bring back Detroit to the time of industry. No? They want to cultivate, to take advantage of this empty space, to live together, to make art in the city, to be creative. And so the general master plan like this is not a precise design project for the city. It's a sort of application, no? In those lots, in those empty spaces, those vacant space, you can make biomass energy park, or you can cultivate your food, or you can make research and innovation, or you can make art, and you decide. I mean, the plan shows the opportunities to you, and then you decide. The master plan of Detroit is made by Stoss Landscape Urbanism, that is a firm led by Chris Reed, that is professor at Harvard. It was one of the authors, young authors of Stalking Detroit. So the master plan is this one, existing of open space network, future ecological network, future open space network. The form of a city will be given, of a new city will be given that by the strength of their open space. But all those open space will be made probably in different ways, you know, by the citizens themselves, without no money and no strategic project, I would say. And so the network of food, or the things that you can find to make, that you can make to make the landscape productive, or to make the lots, the space of living productive. No? So you can choose. It's like a menu. It's considered like a menu. And so the new citizen of Detroit is this one. I mean, no more station, how do you say, no more SUV in a Jeep in the garage, but machines for agriculture. You know? And, okay, this is extreme. No, it's happening in Detroit. It is really extreme. And we did not have such a big crisis and not such a big abandon. And we don't think that is really possible, but what's happening in Detroit will happen in our cities. But this is not true. For example, behind me, now the image is Rome, and there are illegal urban vegetable gardens in the center of Rome, in abandoned spaces that the administration of Rome doesn't cannot maintain, because the green spaces are expensive. The citizen has organized illegal garden, and in Rome you have 152 community illegal gardens. Mostly are illegal, almost all of them are illegal, and also we have 30 guerrilla gardening that are illegal but not permitted. Guerrilla is more radical, and this is a guerrilla gardening installation in the Terme di Caracalla. This is a social rehabilitation experience, a community garden run by unemployed former engineers. But they lost the job, and they became countrymen. So how can you say? And this is Hortus Urbis, an illegal historical garden in the Appia Antica Park, where they grow up only the Roman fruits and vegetables. It's like a Roman vegetable garden. Evise is another illegal garden for education of the elementary school in Piazza Vittorio at the House of Architecture. We did with my firm and with the school and with the pupils, and was to educate the pupils to grow up vegetables, but also to make an installation in an historical garden. So we are much more similar to Detroit that we can believe. In Italy, for example, in the last, from 1997 to 2012, we have built 300 million cubic meters of new construction every year in Italy. 300 million cubic meters means, if you go with the standards, the urbanism, former urbanism standard, means a city for 1.5 million inhabitants. We did, I don't know where, because Italy is thick, not that thick, and we have mountains, but we did a city of like that every year for 15 years. No? And we had a boom, like in Spain, like you have, in the construction market until the 2007, but then we've lost, 35% until 2010. Now I think we lost 40 or 50% in the value of the houses. We have 200,000 kilometers of disused roads. We have 6,000 kilometers of unused railways. We have 5.2 millions of empty houses. And it's not easy to, this is Spain, Cesena, you know this case, no? 30,000 inhabitants, new city near Madrid, completely done and completely unsold, completely empty. In October, there has been this article in the site, a scholar by LSE, London School of Economics, an Italian scholar, made a study about how is going the economy and the politics in Italy in the last 20 years. And he said, what you can read here, unless a miracle, the Italy, the social and economical fabric of Italy is destroyed. There is no hope for this. That's why Detroit is so close, even if in different manners. The Dutch pavilion in the Biennale of Venice in 2010 was made of an empty room with all the empty houses, empty buildings of the Ramstad over our head, like a gravity of the emptiness. In 2012, the pavilion was reset. The Dutch pavilion the German pavilion in 2012 was redone, reused, recycled. Like this was after our exhibition, and I'm very proud of that. This is the new master plan for the city of Munich. Is the result of a competition for young architects, international competition that was like, how do you see the city that you will build, the Munich that you will be in the next 15, 20 years, no? Until 2025, 2030. And the winner project was not a project, it was a sort of newspaper. The name was Agropolis München, and the idea of the project is in the next years we have to restart to cultivate the food for our metropolis. Until now, the industrial city of Munich, that is the richest city in Germany, grew as an incredible growth, consuming the agriculture, the countryside. Now the countryside should come back in the city. And so they provided projects for the unbuilt, for the areas unbuilt but waiting to be built, where the city has a project of new construction. In the while, because the crisis is not convenient, there is no market, even in Germany, in the richest Germany, in the while they are not constructing the sites, they are occupying the space with temporary urbanism made of cultivating space. And this is the project. You see the icon of a project is the silhouette of Munich with the instruments of agriculture and with the animals on top. And this was the installation at the Recycle exhibition. Munich, the plan, the map of Munich made like a cow. And those are the architects, the group of architects. Jörg Schroeder is the reader, professor in Hanover, with their instruments of work. And those are the visions for Munich. Munich that becomes a garden. Also, in the next future, we will not need anymore, because the gasoline is costing a lot, the cars are costing a lot, we don't want pollution in the air, and then. So we have more infrastructure we need. So we can put again the ground on the roads and cultivate them. And this is the opening ceremony of the first work site of the project in Freiheim, and in 3 years they opened 3 new vegetable gardens in the next construction site. Barcelona is not very far from it. This is the Manuel Gausa Actar Arquitectura installation, I mean not installation, it's the project Multi Ramblas that you know very well, that is very interesting for me because it goes back to Le Corbusier and Gatpak, and then comes to nowadays through bringing a sort of demetropolitanization elements, devices inside the city and gaining a lot of public space. I don't go through that much because you probably know better than me. And this was the installation of Manuel. So Detroit, as we saw, is not far from our culture, but also from our situation, for we are doing and making here in Europe. Last but not least, I don't know if you know this case of the Paris 3, Tour Paris 13, the end of October, of last October 2013, they wanted to demolish, they designed a forecast to demolish a nice building in front of a river in Paris, in front of a Ministry of Economy and Finance, and so I don't know how the self-organizing people called wall painters, street artists from all over the world, and they came paying by yourself the ticket from Australia, from Japan, from Brazil, and from Europe, and from the States, and they tried to transform this building in an art installation for avoiding, I would say, the demolition. I mean, the idea of demolition. And this was visit. I mean, you could go to visit it until the end of October. Then in January they should have demolished this building, and then after they closed the visit in November, you could have saved the installation they did inside the building, pixel by pixel, going in internet, in the site. I mean, a big communication machine that was put together to save, for the idea of saving an existing building and creating new values on this building. But exactly the idea of recycle. The impressive thing, I went there to visit, the impressive thing was that the line to enter in the building was average 8-10 hours. I mean, all night long, all day long, just to go inside. And those thousands and thousands of people that were there to save this building were mostly young people from 20, would say, to 35 years, you know, and then some interested intellectual like me. I mean, old intellectual, because for curiosity, some very smart ladies, but they were young. I mean, the impression that I got was that the idea of demolition reconstruction is an idea that the young people of Paris is avoiding. Like now, no? They hate. They want to keep it and to transform it and to find new value and new beauty in intervening, in designing the existing and giving new value. So finally, what can we learn from the experience of Detroit? I would say 5 things. I mean, then we will debate about it. The first thing is that Detroit, the history, the narrative of what's happening now in Detroit demonstrate that the modern city is death. There is really the funeral. I mean, we can appreciate, I love modern city, modern architecture, modern, but the modernity, this idea of making tabula rasa, building new, and enlarging continuously the city. But it's a relative new idea, because it's the idea of modernity. Before that, was very rare, the construction of new buildings. If you look at the building of Palladio, for example, that we all love in Vicenza, the Palladio buildings are recycled. The existing building with a new facade and new stairs. The Basilica of Palladio is recycled. The Teatro di Marcello in Roma is a Roman theater with a villa by the Renaissance villa by Baldassare Peruzzi on top. And the city of Siena, but I mean in Spain should be the same, no? But in the 90 years of, and in the century of modernity, we sort of forgot the way in which we built our precious cities, and we changed. And now probably this is ended, this is over. Detroit demonstrates the outside the 8-mile divide, the infinite city that is American city that is not suffering like the modern city. No? The contemporary city, the never-ending city of Detroit, of the metro area of Detroit, is well living, I would say, no? Without dramatic loss of inhabitants. And, the second thing that we learn from Detroit is that one post-metropolitan phase for our city is possible and is not bad. It's something in the middle between the image that gave to us Jane Jacobs or Edward Soja more recently, and this nice image is depending from the relative harmony that urban life has regained in Detroit, with recreating inhabiting space larger and not fast. Probably the iPhone, I mean, from a theoretical point of view, we can say that the revolution in our economy is given by the smartphone, I mean, the age of information. We transferred on smartphones, computer, many places of our relationships that we needed to build in the material space before. We don't need anymore to build so many places for meeting, so many places for going fastly, infrastructure from arrive fastly in another place. We do all those things. We transferred many spaces of our relationship in a virtual world. And so if the city is like Zygmunt Bauman says, a field of relationship, this field of relationship now is much more empty from the point of view of space that it was before. And so we can take places and have a different life and cultivate our food and live in the open space and make art and relating ourselves for, you know, happiness and other sort of things. The third thing that Detroit demonstrates is that this phase of demising modernity requires new paradigms in designing the city, the architecture, the landscape. You know, the example of new master plan of Detroit is a very good example. But in Europe, we had the master plan for the Ruhrgebiet in Germany, the Emscher Park project, that was perhaps the first project of recycling a region, no? For a completely reuse. The fourth thing is the most significant projects for the future of post-metropolitan cities are projects with shared authorship, like we saw in Detroit, but also in Munich or in Barcelona in the idea of multi-Ramblas by Manuele, that they are projects that put together different initiatives of planners and designers and the spontaneous urban actions of the city makers. There are these new figures of designers, the city makers, citizens that build their public space, this urban space. And they put together all those actors in only one collective project that is very strong, though, like the image of Munich that we saw before can demonstrate. This is the real challenge, is the end of the authors, the end of the star system in architecture. The last thing that we can learn from Detroit, that from a theoretical point of view, there has been a big shift in the way in which we can imagine the future space. And this is the shift from a system of measurements, the territory. You know? We need to calculate how many inhabitants in the city. We need to calculate how far is there, how much time. We don't need that anymore. We have enough infrastructure. We have built enough homes. We have built enough urban spaces. We have built enough. We don't need to calculate anymore. We have space. We need to give values to the space. So the shift is from a system of measurement to a system of values. And this is, I think, the most radical change that moves our field of intervention as architects from the territory, from the city, from the architectural object to the landscape, because the landscape is the value. I mean, in the never-ending city that links the coast of Mediterranean from Barcelona to Genoa to Livorno, I cannot remember where is the border of Barcelona, where is the border of Genova, where is the border of Marseille, where is the... But I can remember that in Genoa there is La Strada Novissima, that in Barcelona there is La Sagrada Familia, or there are the Tibidabo. I mean, we can build a narrative on the city that is the action of designing, just referring to landscape, not more referring to quantities. So, I can understand that changing this paradigm, in assuming that new paradigm of sustainability in the whole significance of the term, social, economical, environmental, and so on, or landscape and ecology. I mean, the new paradigms of the urban development, but I would say of our life environment, and without authorship, with a different idea of authorship, with the wish of not making new buildings, but reusing what we have. It can look like a sort of shortcut of architecture, of architects. No? What are we? What can we do in the I don't know. This is the question. We have to shift the paradigms and imagine a different way to make our job. I would close because Manuel asked this to me with one project. Now, I am searching what can we do. And this project is the project for the international competition they did in Italy for the Italian Pavilion to Milan Expo in 2015. We were involved with many Office of Architecture. And you know, the idea of this Expo in Italy, the former idea by Stefano Boeri was to build a sort of urban farm, enormous, the Expo will be on food. That's why I brought this project. We will be on food, and the Expo city should be a big farm at the borders of Milan with the water channels that goes to the cities and so on and so on. Then this idea has been transformed in a new city for, I mean, a very classical, traditional expansion of the city with the pavilion. This is, you know, the first idea by Stefano Boeri and Herzog de Meuron. Almost no construction, just canopies and greenhouses and this sort of rural environment. Now this is the new project, a city like you are, like a fascist or Nazist, you know, it's a sort of very classical, traditional, with Cardo and the Cubano, and the Italian Pavilion is this road with this body, big body that is the Italian, but completely new buildings. You can imagine that we built that so much, and we never sell anything, and we are going to build this incredible and ugly city. And they made a competition for the Italian pavilion, this one. So this pavilion is like 60 meters for, I mean, the dimension of the pavilion as like the facade of the pavilion is like the facade of Palazzo Farnese in Rome, you know, for giving to you the idea of what they are asking to us. And they asked the competition brief was how to build this pavilion. You have to do those things at the ground floor, those things at the first floor, those things at the floor 2, the things at the floor 3, 4, so our concept was this, the clod, that in English means a piece of ground or a piece of shit also. We thought that the best way to represent Italy to the world in this period, in this age, in this year, is to represent Italy as a landscape, not as a building. We already have Palazzo Farnese. I don't think we can do something better. So the cloud is that, is this one. Is a landscape that contains the very first concept was not to build anything, just a landscape with some inner spaces under the topography, and those sails that are like screens that can project to the world in the day and the night the things we do in Italy. I mean, our beauties, our production, our foods, our bam, 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 bam. Like this. We did this work with Aldo Aimonino, that is another Italian architect professor that I work with very often. In this big competition, we share the debits, I mean, for making this. And this was the concept. That somebody told us, hey, if you don't respect the brief, they will push you out. You have to respect the brief. You have to make a building. And we said, oh, how can we make a building if we don't want to make a building? So at the end, starting from the idea that this place of the Expo should become a park in the first idea, we imagined to build a building for the Italian pavilion as they wanted, but then this building will become the place in which they can put the machines for the maintenance of the parks, or they can grow up mushrooms inside and so on. Because our buildings was exactly in the brief, but we put it at the ground floor, a square, and then at the first floor what did they want, but at the floor -1, -2, -3, and all the ground that we were digging in the soil will be used, because our stones will be used for paving the roads of the air. No refreshment, no heating, because there is natural heat and fresh from the ground, and those big sails were capturing the rugiada, come si dice? Okay, the water, the humidity of the water in the morning, or the solar, or from this side like this they have solar panels, and from the other side they had screens. So it's a sort of ecological machine in the form of the building. But probably we were wrong. We should have made just a landscape without building underneath, because they pushed us out to the first jury. We did not arrive to the jury of architect, intellectual, philosopher. We were pushed out from the boys, that they said, okay, this is not respecting the brief. We were the last. But the project was really sophisticated from an ecological point of view, and the machine was working very good. We had many consultant firms for sustainability, ecology, representation, visual installation. There are 2 or 3 curious things. The first one, but probably every one of us made like this, is that in the Expo of Shanghai, we designed an exhibition and built an exhibition for the Silk Road map, the road of commerce that linked the Italy to China. And so in the pavilion of the Expo, the Silk Road Pavilion, we designed the installations, and we had the same sort of sails. I realized this thing after the day, but we're showing where we projected the big personalities, in the period of the Silk Road map. And also we did this enormous wall model that was in scale, with one scale in the plan and another scale in the height. The scale of height was 10 times the plan, and there were almost 5,000 stripes of wood, like section, because the Silk Road was a grand tour in Asia, and so it was difficult to cross all the mountains. We wanted to give the impression, and the nice thing was that we arrived in Shanghai with many drawings, with all the drawings of a single one, every one of the 5,000 pieces, so it was different. And 2 days before the opening of the exhibition, nobody was there. We were there with the drawings, nothing was done. And they said, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. But I was very worried, we were going crazy. Suddenly, 2 days before, I think 20 or 30 Chinese guys appeared, and they did everything. All of you can see was done in 2 nights. And the opening was perfect. And this big Silk Road map became a sort of icons for the Chinese. The Chinese goes there, and they all wanted to be shooted under the China, not the Italy. And this was the installation. I mean, it was very similar to the idea of the sails, but this is more sophisticated from another point of view. And those were the sketches made by Aldo, that is a beautiful hand, and those were the renderings, the facades, the way in which we imagined the landscape who represented Italy. And the plans, as you go down, becomes a building. The light can go inside the building with a regular intensity, I would say, through some devices we were providing. But, I mean, this is in the world of dreams, because we were pushed out. And the winner project was this big boy with a, I don't know, a sort of techno skin, yeah, but for me it was the same building they built in Shanghai for Italian Pavilion that they will bring to her and change the skin. I mean, exactly with no interest. But the second interesting, curious thing, you see the plan of our ground floor, is that last week Jose Luis Esteban Penelas, you know this guy, is an architect from Madrid who's running an American school, called me and said, hey Jose, I've been shortlisted for the construction of a Spain pavilion in the Expo. Won't you be my partner and he sent it to me his project, shortlisted. But it's incredibly like mine. I didn't show mine to him because I'm scaramantico. I don't want to bring bad luck to him because we lost. We were really the last one. But his idea for is the same idea of an inhabited landscape with a big square. And this makes me very honored to participate with him, to have a second chance, like something in the life can happen. But also was I was very happy because also in the second chance I am designing with him a garden, no? Like Carlo Scarpa said, and like Detroit is showing in the direction that Detroit is showing up. So thank you very much to everybody for listening to me. I just want to say that this book, that is a sort of impresa collettiva, Manuela ha scritto, Joao Nunes wrote pieces, Charles Waldheim wrote pieces. There are many authors that are also friends working on the same themes that I presented here today. Is edited also in English. In Italian is ended. I mean, they are reprinting. I was very lucky. In English, not. You can find it on Amazon. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jose. Come here, come Isabel, and this time we did a little institutional roundtable, but usually we no, not a problem. I am here.
I have been long.
No, fantastic.
I'm sorry.
Now it's the moment to have questions with the public. This is an open debate, but in this case, because there is this fantastic collaboration with the University Pompeu Fabra, with the Department of Humanitats. We want to close this session and also the symposium, the cycle, with this more formal round table, but in fact it's not a round table. It's at the beginning we start with questions with you, a kind of dialogue, and also with the public.
I'm curious of what you think of the thing.
I like a lot. I didn't know this project. It's the first time that it's the first time as you. Congratulations, Jose, because it's very, very beautiful, I think, and for the public also probably it has been very interesting. Well, perhaps yes, but I don't know. I start with two questions because I was very impressed with your lecture. Thank you. It was amazing, and it was very interesting for us. Two things very quick. In fact, reactions more than questions. The first is this affirmation, very interesting and also very clear, no, in your lecture. You say that Detroit is more or less the funeral of the modernity, no? The funeral of the paradigm of the economical development, but also of the material city. I think also, but this is my intuition, that is also the funeral of the postmodernity. is not only the funeral of the modernity, it's the funeral of the postmodernity as the paradigm, not of the economical development and the material city, but the paradigm, the postmodernity of the coming back and the paradigm of the grammatical city, the kind of stylistic or formal city. And it's very interesting because it's two funerals at the same time. Why I think this? Evidently because we are in an advanced architecture center and we believe that this is a new period of knowledge in the, not only architecture, but in the space and also in the social organizations, that is not linked only with the modernity, but also with the postmodernity as a kind of eclectic and cynical and also way not come back or mixed situation between the capacity to produce in the modernity and the capacity to, how to explain, this design or to formalize of the classical movement. But probably because the other thing is that there, the postmodernity was the idea of redemption, regeneration, and we are in a new period that is reinformation. The recycle is to introduce information to new information in a system to react this system. And I think this is very, very interesting in your lecture. All this situation of reinformation, of reactivation, and not only as a redemption or a regeneration, but also as a reinformation, the capacity to put information, to put new energy in a system and to react the system. But this is my reaction, is not a question. Perhaps we can debate about it. The other thing is about the landscape, between linking it with the emotional landscapes as the cycle of the Pompeu Fabra and the cycle directed by Tony and Isabel. The landscape is a very curious thing because it's always here at the end you talk about the landscape. I don't know, I had this is my first intuition with your lecture. It's the first time that I think this, but I think that the idea of landscape, evidently the landscape for a classical vision or gaze was a kind of garden, nature, but this was, in the 80s we start to change the idea of landscape with the idea of a kind of the idea of void. The landscape as a alternative space to the city, to the monumental city, but also to the construction. The idea of void, terrain vagues, was in the 80s. Immediately in the 90s, the idea of landscape was in relation with the idea of topos, topography, architecture, but as a topography. In the 2000s, I think that the landscape, but this is the first time that I say it, start to be a kind of matrix, the landscape as a kind of infrastructure of the territory, linked with the idea of multi-city, the idea of territorial city, the idea also of the city, also in my projects, as you say, no? The idea of matriciality, the capacity to understand the landscape as a system and as an infrastructure. But perhaps now, your fantastic lecture starts to say, hey, in Detroit there's a new process that is the landscape as a dynamic process, as a programmation, not only as a in spatial terms, but also in informational terms. The landscape starts to be an organism, strange, who is a process, and sometimes this process is spontaneous, also self-made, and sometimes is informational and informal, no? Because it's informational. And this is a thing that I am not, it was the first time that I have this intuition. I don't know, I am sharing with you, but I think that it's a new process in relation with this lecture and with Detroit. And if is this, the question that, yes, is my question, the first was about the funeral of the postmodernity, but yes, well, and this you say about it. If the landscape is not only a void, it's not only a panorama, it's not only a topos, it's not only a matrix, it starts to be a process, etc. Where start the capacity of the architecture to continue to qualify our habitat, our spaces, with our instruments, because our instruments were traditionally formed, the order, the organization. When we don't have form, we don't have order, or we don't have organization. Or we have another kind of form, another kind of order, or another kind of organization. And it is this, where is the draw, where is the design, where is the planification, or is another kind of design, another kind of draw, another kind of planification, how to express the new spaces with this new situation where the landscape is also a dynamic process, is also information, is also other thing. No? And this is my question: how to you say about it, you talk about it, where as architects how we can explore this situation. Probably we are exploring this new situation, but the idea of value is also in our work. We need to understand architecture as the capacity to put value in the space, in all the senses. How to do now? No? This is my question, and perhaps is how to express this new situation with the instruments of the architecture, not the traditional architect, but the instruments of the were in relation with the space and the capacity to express the space. No? How to continue to work in this sense. I think the pavilion is one of the possibilities, no? To try to don't have a closed form, and then, etc. But I pass. This is my question. I don't know if you answered to question by question, or with as you want.
More, maybe
as you want.
Maybe you speak before me.
Okay.
And then I react.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that working?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you for your lecture. We really liked very much, and I think it's a good point after 2 days of lectures on landscape and emotion from really different perspectives. But I think that many issues raised by us in those 2 days were present in a way in your presentation. I was really extremely astonished by these images of Detroit and by the lessons of Detroit. Yesterday in the evening, just 24 hours ago, we had a lecture of a person who is not present here, but who was talking about haunted images and the idea of landscapes being haunted and phantoms and specters, no, in the landscape, which I think in some of the images you showed of Detroit were really they were really like very adequate. They made me think of that. I don't know if you think so. That was Abigail was saying yesterday about these haunted landscapes, and also when you were showing these images of Detroit, and your lecture was going on, I thought sometimes of Piranesi. Obviously, no, of these Antiquità di Roma and all this sublime and all that sort of exactly, no. So these reenacting, exactly, reenacting all things. But on the other side, there was in these not yielding to catastrophe, a sort of opening to utopia, to something that is hope, the place left to hope in that. And there was one of the images you showed where the word hope was there, and among these pretended destruction there was nevertheless hope and something alive, no, and a sense of care. That's also what I think that's interesting, a sense of caring, And well, that's the ideas that although we are very tired, I think, and our brains are almost like demising like modernity, you know. But that was very. I liked it very much, really. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation also. I think it was very emotional in a way that, since we've been talking about emotions the whole 2 days, to see all those images that represent the destruction of a model of a city in a particular time. And it was very interesting when you connected this with our more close or more near reality in this neighborhood. In a way, it's one of those areas that's becoming transformed and reinvented in a way, and that's very interesting. There is one part that I'm moving completely in the other direction, that there's one thing that is the people who was left in the city of Detroit were those that were not able to escape from it. But at the same time, it's people that have some emotional attachment to those places that once they used to know. And that part is very, very powerful, and is what moves those people to organize those gardens, to organize these activities, to survive. And I think there is something sometimes we forget as academics, from architecture side or from the other side, that the power of the people to reinvent themselves and to find their own ways to store. They have their own architecture, they have their own landscapes, they have their own ideas. And I'm wondering sometimes, I'm not good at that. I'm very pleased sitting in my chair in my office in the university and teach whatever the rest of the world what they should do. But I wonder what wouldn't be the nice idea is to go and find, not to wait to teach them how to do things, but to learn from them how they do those things and support them how to improve them. So I always think that it's fascinating. The more I see the fabric of post-industrial spaces and how people are surviving. So we were involved in a project in which women associations were doing incredible things to support their own children and so on, things without any public support. So I always wonder, in the moment that there is no more resources, at least in this country, to major projects, to go into this micro kind of analysis and go into micro supporting small projects for different people, maybe with the techniques of young architects, to go into a very small type of projects. Probably they are not very nice for a nice catalog or something, but probably will have a much profound impact in society. I don't know, I always wonder that part. And I think that power of emotion, so emotional attachment to the location, that is something geographies that work a lot. That's something we cannot avoid when we think about these people. It's just a suggestion, it's not trying to say anything. I thought something that's one of the things that suggests me your presentation. Thank you.
No, but we start. You answer, and after we open.
We go to them.
Yes, yes. And I think that they have a lot of questions to you also.
No, thank you very much for your kind comments. I don't know. I try to put.
Yes.
And try to, and so I try to put together some issues. Manuel, no? Saying what is the first thing was about the funeral of modernity, and the second thing was about how landscape is now, you know, nowadays. I mean, almost the same issue that you quoted. The things that surprise me when I am making these studies, I mean, when I'm thinking about those things, I mean, how we do react to the end of modernity or to the condition of the crisis. But for me, we are not in the crisis. We are in a new phase. I mean, also the crisis has been a blessing in disguise because it gave to us the strength to finish with a corrupted system of economy building, occupying the space, and consuming the landscape and consuming the values that we have. But then, when I think these things that I have told today looks like very innovative, you say, but I don't think so. I mean, has ever been like this? No, the landscape has ever been, at the end, as João Nunes says, the landscape is the portrait of a society. I mean, is a portrait that is the contrary of the Dorian Gray portrait. It's a portrait that continuously changes. And so we have to take advantage of those changes, and in this way it is obvious that we try to make the landscape representative, but also productive, also infrastructure, also because this is what we want. Is the way in which we want to live now. I mean, with open spaces to run, not polluted air. I mean, very simple things that we sort of forgot. And in Detroit, they are able to realize, because of a crash of a city, obviously, but this is not the reason, in my opinion. The Americans think that what happens in Detroit is singular, can happen only there and in the closer part of the Rust Belt, because it was a disaster, like the eruption of Pompeii. But it's not the eruption of Pompeii. Detroit is the American Pompeii, but without the Vesuvio. I mean, what's happening in Detroit is the possibility of representing a new portrait of our society that is given by the iPhone and the iPad. And I mean, we are in this era, in this age of informative, how do you call it? I like this term, informative technology or age. We are using completely different, completely new devices. We are building virtual worlds, virtual spaces, and I said this now, and we don't need the same amount of space to. And also we have built a lot, and so we are trying to inhabit what we have and to give value to this, and we don't need to return, to go back to the previous situation, because we always do faster with that. No? I don't think we need, in Italy, like in Spain or in Greece now, the government says that the way to react to the crisis is to build new infrastructures. We want to build a bridge between Sicily and the peninsula, il ponte sullo Stretto di Messina. We want to build the European corridor, the high-speed train, but we already have it. What do we have to do with the bridge between? Nobody goes by car in Sicily, you know. Everybody goes by flights and by ship if they have time. So is you know, some of this age changing in economy, in society, in culture, that obviously change also the way in which we represent ourselves in the space and the way in which we use our spaces. This is dramatically evident in Detroit because it was helped, we say, by the disaster, the social disaster that happened. But we can find it also in Barcelona, or in the idea in which the people of Barcelona, through your project, or the people of Munich, through the project of Jörg Schroeder, or the people of New York, to the project of the High Line. You can imagine that the High Line, that was a railway, has become the most important location in New York for the fashion ateliers, big architects. Renzo Piano has his new offices on the High Line. Stella McCartney has his atelier on the High Line. Comme des Garçons has 2 ateliers on the High Line district. Yoshi Yamamoto has 1 atelier. I mean, everybody goes on the High Line district, but you can imagine, what is that? A sort of, you know, garden on a bridge. No? This is incredible just 5 years ago. So we are making the same, I mean, we all in the Western world, because the East is very different. No? The processes are very different. I don't know if they are back in a certain way or they are forward, but who cares? We are in this situation. So at the end, it's nothing new. No? Baldassarre Peruzzi made this beautiful villa on the theater of Marcello. Palladio made this basilica that is one of the most interesting architecture of the Italian Renaissance, of the world heritage, using a former existing medieval building and putting a porch around a new dome. And so this is, I mean, the space of our intervention, of our creativity, is like the space that Palladio had. I mean, this is not a rhetoric of antique. You know? It's the idea that you can create beauty and strength, a new condition of life, new quality of life, designing the existing buildings, operating on the existing landscape, obviously, we are in a different age, and we can make. We have different problems. We have the problem of production, of economy, of ecology, and all those things can be afforded by designing these spaces. But I mean, we just try. No? You said in this neighborhood. I was walking with Manuel before starting this speech around here. This was an industrial neighborhood with many new interventions. Many young architects from Barcelona made this building. You can see, this is the building of him, of them, of them. This is a building of a costruttoria. This is the building of that. But if you change all the buildings, this is no more an industrial. I mean, the fascinating of this place is living like here. Now, this is a recycle, exactly what I understand. If you substitute all with new buildings, you lose those values, you know? And so, but I think that the loss of money, the loss of economy of construction is a blessing in disguise, because force us to work on what already is with no money and no possibility to do anything else.
No, we continue also with the public. Well, I don't want to focalize the debate. Just to answer, I think that my personal is that when Isabel talks about Palladio, Piranesi or Ruskin, there is something of nostalgia there. In Palladio, I think that it's something of confidence in the composition, and there in Detroit is another thing, is the potentiality of a possibility of a strategy to reform and not to compose. But the two things go together.
In Detroit there is also Ruskin. People go there because they are fascinated to the death of a body, no, of a city.
No, but it's. I think that there is a lot of questions there. Also, Tony, was very interesting your thing about the society and the absence of the public and the capacity to self-organize. I imagine that there is a lot of questions in this sense.
Maite.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I really, really enjoyed it. I agree with this idea of the funeral of modernism or postmodernism. And in a way, I have two observations to make. The first one, that I feel a little bit that these manifestations or these effects of what's happening in Detroit, it's a little bit like going to the funeral. You mentioned the Great Beauty, the movie, which I love. But I think that there's also another two movies from the New York Can, which is the Barbarian Invasions and the Decline of the American Empire as well, that touch on the same topic with a little bit of conformism and saying, you know what, this all didn't work really, but we're all part of this mess, so let's go on with life. So I think that these manifestations of, social participation and greenery and taking over the city are really good indicators of what's to come. And in that sense, I wanted to make reference to one thing that was not mentioned was underlined, which is the car. You're talking about one of the capitals in the world, that the car manufacturer, which is really the paradigm of the 40s society, right? And we design cities. Basically, this is the result of a city made for cars. What's interesting is that if you look at the new prototype for cars, which we're studying in one seminar here at the IAC, is that one of the issues that they're investigating, the car manufacturers, is the city of the future, how they envision the city of the future. Audi is looking into that, Mercedes is doing into that, and GM, surprisingly, are all looking into network vehicles. In fact, General Motors has a vehicle that's called the electric network vehicle that is driveless and is work based on networks, on just communication. And what is interesting is that these companies, they're not stupid as we think they are, they're foreseeing a future that is all based on information. And it's quite interesting that the most radical proposals are coming from the car manufacturers. So in a way, I wanted to get your sense of the issue of the car, which is, I think, is the big protagonist here.
In fact, a lot of images you show reminded me of Beirut after the war. A lot of the images you show of Beirut after the war, and nature on the buildings and the abandoned buildings. And I think that if the people there had the initiative to use the abandoned lands the same way they did it in Detroit, like Beirut would have taken a totally different evolution. But I have a question concerning the nature of these spaces. I feel they're always at a transition stage, because as soon as the economic gets better, the prices of the lands are different. So the way you use the land is no more like appropriate. So how do you see the evolution of these lands and the way they use them in an evolution of economy?
Maybe I answered that.
My question is related to this. Yeah, I was wondering something similar of what she said, because as she said, these photographs you show reminds us of so many other pictures included in cities in US. For example, in the 70s, like 4 years ago, the city of New York was in bankruptcy. Neighborhoods that now are so precious, like for example the Lower East Side, were having buildings that they were down, and people took it for making gardens. They did exactly the same. Nowadays, perhaps there is 2, 3, I'm not so sure how many there are left, and because some powerful citizens were able to fight against taking this land over and building expensive buildings. It also, one of your pictures was the cover of one book by Andrew Moore, who you mentioned. Yeah, and you mentioned that he kind of glorified the past as ruins of what US has, you know. It reminds me, he did also the same, the same means that photographing all buildings that they were going to disappear in some way. And he did it perhaps 15 years ago, and he did it for all the Times Square area, okay, with all the old theaters, all the old prostitute houses, etc. No? And what we know now is that all the main headquarters of all the press companies are there, plus other companies. And then, as she was asking, I was asking myself, I hope I could be as optimistic as you were through your great presentation, but you know, what's going to happen? You know, if there is there new laws that will make that city develop differently, that citizens, we will have the right to choose, you know, or big companies are going to take, like always, those spaces when they need it. Another example of gardens, like in Philadelphia, in the center, there is a neighborhood, no white person wants to go there. You know, and it's a space that it reminds me of Beirut, you know, buildings that they're demolished, empty lots, and there are some organizations that they're taking those lands and building exactly the same, you know, green gardens to teach also the people to grow, and also to grow vegetables, and also to be able to change their diet. I mean, it's all related, no? It's all related, and nobody wants that land. But what will happen when that land is taking over again? You know.
you, to other public. And I don't know, perhaps also, I'm not sure that I am agree with you, because I have the confidence that we can, in this process, also this micro scale, perhaps is difficult to lose the capacity to have global visions. I need to have global visions for the visit to the city, and this is yes, exactly a both possibility. But also, I pass the stage to our guests, and thank you again. And yes, this is the final response, and also the conclusion of the cycle, I think.
Well, I don't think I'm fit, and anyone is fit by now for a final thing. First of all, thank to all to resist up to the last minute. That was great of you, and I think it has been a good end to change the shores, come to visit you here at the Institute of Advanced Architecture. It makes a good complement to all what has been said about emotions, emotionality, experience, immersion, and I forget many of the words that have been said these days. This should be an experience we should make on another scale. Let me use the word in the future. And because I think it's profitable and we can learn both of us. And we thank you too for accepting us as guests, co-organizers, and so on. And well, Tony, you want to say something?
I'm just repeat my congratulates for all the people, for all the participants, and thank you for all the people who has been involved from the beginning, from the Institute of Advanced Architecture, and everyone at the Pompeu Fabra, especially Isabel, that is really the key point to connect both institutions, and has the energy to organize the whole thing. In those cases, I'm a quite lazy person when it gets to this point. I think it's been I love the, one of the things that moves me to be involved in this type of projects is to enter into this interdisciplinary discourse. I'm a geographer, and I always love the way they think about space, the architects, because they look the space completely different as we see. Well, not completely different, but quite different on those. On what you think is a big scale for us is a smaller scale, or on the upper. Yeah, that's the. But that's why it's interesting to have this kind of connection. It's been a incredible 2 days of getting ideas and thinking. We'll have like more than a weekend to digest some of those ideas and try to get something out of it. Jean-Marc is here. That's one of the persons who's been involved for the whole time. It's been great to have you here again. Paul Capdevila is also here, and then I think there's nobody else from the presenters, but thank you very much.